Welcome to another Encore episode of the Backup Wrap-Up. This very popular episode looks at a three-part series of Reddit posts from a security specialist who finally agreed to write about ransomware after a bunch of people asked him to do that. What he put together ends up being a full ransomware response checklist: how to stop it from getting in the first place, how to keep it from spreading once it does get in, and what to do if you actually get hit. This is exactly the process that we built into my latest book, Ransomware Response and Recovery, which is now available. If you've ever wondered whether your organization has the right pieces in place before, during, and after a ransomware attack, I think you'll get a lot of value from this episode. By the way, if this is your first time watching or listening to me, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. I've been obsessing over backup, recovery, and now cyber recovery for over 30 years. If that's your bag, then I'm your guy. You're not going to find anyone more interested in backup than me. Ever since 1993, when I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the database that we had just lost. Now I've written 5 O'Reilly books, a blog, and a podcast. Here, we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Hi, folks. Dr. Mike Saylor and I have just published our new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery. Most books on this subject tell you how not to get ransomware. We actually took a different approach. We start by acknowledging the odds of your organization getting hit by some kind of ransomware are virtually 100%. So instead of pretending that we can prevent all of it, we teach you how to prepare for it, respond, and recover. Ransomware is inevitable. Recovery is a choice. Check it out at stopransomware.com. Hi, and welcome to Backup Central's podcast. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me my delayed shipment consultant, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis. Wait, what's delayed?
My flooring shipment, and I turned to you for...
What? I thought you received one box.
I did, but I ordered a big shipment of flooring, and then I ordered a much smaller shipment. And I did that in 2 shipments because I couldn't order all of it at once. And then I had to order like another 10% in a second shipment. I received the second shipment like 3 weeks ago. I still haven't received the first shipment. And I just turned to you for, emotional support in this time of I'm not doing anything until the entire shipment comes in. It's just ridiculous.
Maybe they ran out of the raw stuff. Yeah, whatever the...
See, this is why you're here. You're here to make me not so angry. That's why I said you're my delayed shipment consultant. All I know is it's not in my hot little hands, and I'm not doing squat in my garage until I get the entire shipment.
Just think, though, about delayed gratification once you finally get the pallet.
Oh, this is the ultimate in delayed gratification. I've never had so much trouble spending money in my life.
You're annoyed.
Hashtag first world problems.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah. Good times. Good times. Rate us at ratethispodcast.com/restore, or just click on your favorite podcatcher and click down to the bottom and give us some stars, or maybe even a comment. Talk about how much you love Prasanna's beard. I'm good with that. And I was so much longer and darker than mine. And so Curtis. I sent you this post that I saw on Reddit, which it's actually a series of 3 posts from a Reddit user called Snorkel42. Mm-hmm. Don't let his snorkeling ID fool you. The person knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this person other than that they post regularly in a subreddit called Security Cadence. But he also posted, he or she, I don't know. If I mistakenly call the person a he, I apologize in advance for my misogyny. The it was about ransomware, and they are a specialist in the areas of security, and many people had asked them to post stuff about ransomware, and they had continually said, I don't want to post about ransomware. And can you imagine why that would be?
You're just propagating. Well, it's ransomware you get hit with because there were a bunch of gaps before ransomware got hit,
Right,
and it's better to address the problem rather than trying to
right.
address sort of the outcome.
Yeah. So ransomware to this person is the symptom of a whole lot of bad things that you were already doing or not doing. And they've spent their career helping to make sure you do those things. But with the, I think two things. One is that obviously the ransomware attacks are getting to a fever pitch. And then two, there is what we talked about on the previous episode, which was this concern about Russia.
Yep.
And we did cover that, didn't we?
Yeah, we covered the Conti ransomware gang in
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the previous podcasts.
Yeah. The Krebs on security post
Yep.
that the concern is that the level of the fever pitch that we're experiencing might actually go through the roof. And so they said, hey, I'm going to finally, I'm fine. I'll post about ransomware.
Yeah.
But even
But
in their post about ransomware, it, it really wasn't that much about ransomware as much as it
yeah.
was about the things. No, that's not true. I'll take that back. It was here is the way ransomware works. And so I'd say the first one, I'd say of the three
Uh,
series,
or
the first one was about here's how to prevent it. Number one, like from getting in. The second was here's how to prevent it from doing more damage once it's in. And then the third one was okay, all right, you're totally screwed. You got to reach for your backups.
yeah.
Is that
The one thing I would add to that is he also was careful saying, I don't want to just focus on the Conti ransomware and provide you steps to prevent that because there are so many other ransomware flavors out there. If you build something for just one, right, you're not going to be protecting yourself. Let's take a holistic approach. And like you said, let's
good
cover how
point?
do you prevent it from getting in? How do you prevent the spread of it? And then how do you recover?
Yeah, good point.
The first one is called Initial Breach, I think is how he titled the first article.
Right. So the phishing, basically they're saying that that is the number one way that you get ransomware.
Yep. Someone accidentally clicking an email, opening up something, letting the attackers in, and they don't even know about it. So, how do you prevent your users from
Right.
clicking on malicious links?
Now it's interesting. This goes, yeah, sorry. This goes somewhat against what some of the advice of one of the guests that we had on the podcast, which was they basically said, look, your people are going to click on stuff. Stop relying on. I don't know if I don't know if it's against, but he deprioritized training
No.
and
Yeah.
like phishing assessments. Didn't you think?
Th- yeah. So, this author does say training can only help you so much. I think the couple things though that he did mention is you do need some level of training, but you need to make sure people don't feel like they're being punished when they do the wrong thing, right? You want that transparency. You want to be telling people it's okay for you to say that I clicked the wrong thing because then the
Right.
IT team can try to evaluate what's going on and try to contain it. The sooner they know, the better it
Right.
is. But if, say, someone's afraid because
Right.
they're going to get in trouble, they might be fired, it becomes taboo, then no one's going to report it. And that's actually really bad.
Yeah, they said to prioritize rewarding over punishment. Make it known, like you said, that it's okay to call in. We want you to call in, even if you messed up. And they also said consider doing your own phishing assessments. I read some of the comments and they talked about that they had a thing where you got some it was some strikes. It was like 10 strikes. It was like you
Mm,
could click on 10
bad
malicious
things. Yeah.
emails, and then it was the 10th one, and then they actually had a series of escalations where it started out, "Hey, we really told you thing," I think that you can do both. I think you can do both carrot and stick, reward and
Yeah.
punishment, where yes, you want to reward people for calling in. Thank you for calling. I accidentally clicked. And then if the person clicks, doesn't know because you did a phishing assessment, you do a series of escalating things where that ultimately you can have a person this was discussed in the comments, not necessarily that you would fire somebody that keeps doing this, but you might say, okay, this person cannot be trusted with
Yeah.
a straight internet connection.
Yeah.
All email from this person will be monitored. Yeah. They can only open email that's straight from our Exchange server or whatever, stuff like that.
So phishing was sort of one way that people get in. But I think once they're in, whichever mechanism it is, it's okay. How do you detect that someone's in? And I think, Curtis, this is what you're going to say about this notion of droppers.
Yeah, I actually didn't know this part. I was fascinated that basically that the actual phishing results in a very small piece of software whose job it is to install the actual piece of software.
Yeah.
And he calls that a dropper.
Yep.
And so the idea is understand that's the way it works, that a piece of code gets dropped in, and then that piece of code executes. And the only purpose of that piece of code is to download the other piece of code. And so they said that you could stop that. You could say, you can't run arbitrary pieces of code
Yep.
in locations that are directly accessible by the end user, you know,
Or you could restrict what
and
applications are allowed to run on a laptop, for instance.
yes,
Now, so
whitelisting. I think
yep.
whitelisting is I think it's the best the best way to stop stuff like this. It's also the highest touch because it means that every new application that anybody has to install, they have to get approval.
Yep. Think it's a way to guarantee legitimate applications have gone through some sort of validation process, security review, etc., before it's being allowed to be deployed in your environment.
And then the next thing it talked about was that a random file running should not be downloading files from the internet, that it should only be HTTP and HTTPS is downloading from the internet. And he said, with exceptions, SFTP, for example. So he talked about, again, accessing that. Also, possibly blocking bizarre TLDs, right? And unnecessary locations. You could just simply say, listen, we don't have anything to do with Russia. Why would we download anything from Russia? And if there is somebody in our company that needs to download stuff from Russia, they will be accepted. That was a very running theme I heard was
Yeah.
lock down everything and allow exceptions.
Yeah. And I was going to bring up two things. One was, what's a TLD for our listeners?
Oh, top level domain. That's like .com or .ransomware. There is no
Okay.
.ransomware, but
And was it you or was it one of our guests who was talking about how they worked at a company that completely locked down their network and the network admin would never let them do their backups and everything was
no, that
by
was me.
except okay.
That was me. Yeah. Yeah. That was a client of mine where they had internal firewalls, and
Yeah.
that's an example of going to the extreme of now you're preventing core business functions,
Yeah.
right?
But you
They also talked about local firewalls, which is what
yep.
we were just talking about. That the and we're going to get to that more in the next section is so they're just looking he's looking
It's
for
like best
ways to
practices
stop the
almost.
dropper from getting
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Thought was an interesting point I never thought about is he does have a point about they block newly created domains, which I thought or had been dormant for a while and then are now active,
Right.
which I thought was very interesting because it's something I'd never thought about, but it totally makes sense. Usually, when you get ransomware, these actors they spin up domains and they start communicating using that domain. So, yeah, you could have a policy to just block these domains so they can't actually reach back out to the command and
Right.
control servers to be able to download from the dropper the actual exploit code.
Right. And they said they weren't aware of anything where that you can do this for free, but there are tools
Yeah.
that are available to help you do this. right?
This reminds me,
There's
what is it? What were the initials? The DNS.
DDI.
Yeah, and I think that goes to some of that as well, where it's like, hey, if you have some of those controls in place, you can now prevent unauthorized access to domains they should not be having access to.
Exactly. And then they started talking about preventing lateral movement inside. Think about the ways that people need to move within your organization and allow that, but block all other movement, lateral movement between servers. And I think, again, going back to that company, that was a perfect example of they had blocked all lateral movement between all servers, and I couldn't get my job done. Their
Yep.
only problem, and they should have done that, and they were forward thinking in that regard, but you do need to allow exceptions for things like backup. That is
Yep.
definitely a server to server lateral movement.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's also other
eh,
simple things like one of them was your favorite topic, right? Locking down RDP and SSH. If it's not
yes,
needed, then lock it down. SMB is the same way as well for vCenter, right? Figure out what actually needs access and what needs to be available to the internet. And one of the points he made is you should just assume that your internal network is as hostile as internet access. So once an exploit happens, you can't trust anything internally.
they were also. I didn't necessarily agree with this one here, and that was it's time to kill monolithic file servers. Now, I don't have a problem with the file server. It's just I think when they mean monolithic file server, they're just saying a file server where everybody in the company can access all the data.
Access.
I would
Yeah.
agree there.
Yeah.
Anybody that's doing that in a
Yeah.
company of more than 3 people
Segregate the
is
data, isolate to
yeah.
departments that need access, use ACLs, make sure the people who need access have access, and then monitor who's accessing what.
So they made a specific example of just because accounts receivable gets attacked, something shouldn't happen to payroll. These are both finance functions, but they're separate finance functions and they should have their own areas, right?
Yep.
And this is another one that I harp on is about protecting privileged credentials. And
You don't just
he
have
he
your
he
password
says
tattooed on your forehead, Curtis.
they recommended implementing things like LAPS, which I had to look up, which stands for Local Administrator Password Solution.
Setting a different random password for the common local admin account on every computer in the domain. So you don't use one password for everything.
And then MFA. I think every system, every privileged account needs to have MFA. And I'm sorry, that's a pain. I use it all the time, but it is
But
what it is.
but wait, why do you need a privileged account? You should Here's the thing, most times you should probably not need privileged accounts. Sorry, you do not need to access your privileged accounts.
Uh, Agreed, but they have to exist, and so you have to
Yes.
lock them down this
Yeah.
way. I think what
Yeah.
you're saying is MFA shouldn't be that big of a deal for you if
Yeah.
you set up modern administration.
Yeah. And you should rarely be using that.
And then very last on the list, and I would have put it
Mm.
first, that's just me, and that was patching your stuff.
How many times has that come up on the podcast when we talk about
Yeah,
ransomware?
yeah, exactly. So the next one is about it's okay. So you got some ransomware. Let's talk about the things that they're going to try to do. The very first thing they listed was deleting of shadow copies. And so
Mhm.
and really shadow copies are basically like he's talking about
Snapshot.
Windows shadow copies, right?
Yeah, I
Like
think Windows
VSS.
shadow copies. Yep.
And so there is a tool here which I never heard of called Raxine, and it stops you from deleting shadow copies. He said it stops everybody from deleting them. So just realize that if you've got some regular thing that regularly deletes shadow copies, it'll break that. But it's something on GitHub, so it's a open source tool.
And just reading that briefly, I think many backup tools when you're backing up Windows applications uses shadow copy. So be careful if you are using that because you may not be able to do your backups.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would differentiate between shadow copies made just for the purposes of backups and shadow copies that are made and left there. I don't know if there's like a different, because I know that when you
Mm,
make a snapshot, you say why you're making the snapshot,
yeah,
but agreed that this is not something that you're just
yeah,
going to download and just implement.
yeah,
Might break all your backups. What it might do is it might allow you to create that snapshot, but then it leaves all those snapshots around and won't let you delete them. And you might get an error on your backup because it can't delete the snapshot.
yeah. Or your production could run out of space and then your app dies.
And then what's the next one here?
So the next one is a common theme for us when we talk about ransomware.
Mhm.
It's less about the actual encrypting of data. It's the fact that these ransomware actors, especially the Conti group, they like to exfiltrate your data and steal sensitive data and then hold you hostage and be like, hey, you want to pay? Then you have to pay twice, once for the decryption key and then once to make sure we don't publish your data. And then sometimes they will still go and publish your data.
Right.
Right. So in this post, he talks about how can you make sure you can detect data exfiltration. And he talks about everything from if you understand network patterns, you could look for anomalies. You could also look at other tools to see
Right.
when data is actually being read and sent. So there's some interesting tools that he talked about. One that I never thought about, which was this mechanism called from Thinks called Canary tokens,
Right.
where it basically creates a false file. And anytime someone accesses it, it generates a token and sends it home. And then it'll send you an email saying, hey, by the way, someone accessed this file. So you can sort
Right.
of get notified if, hey, someone's accessing something which they probably normally never should be. Because most of this
Yeah.
ransomware software and data exfiltration, it's just programmatically reading, like scanning folders, reading files, trying to figure out what to send.
And they mentioned both commercial solutions and open source solutions like the one you mentioned. They also mentioned something called Zeek, which and that it analyzes net flow. But there are
Mhm.
commercial tools which we've mentioned on here, and I'd like to get more of those companies on here. And their recommendation was the same as mine, which is looking for something that uses behavioral analytics to determine what is and is not a normal file transfer.
Yeah.
Right? That should be able to spot a massive exfiltration attack. And then the response against encryption, they talked about the EDR XDR, which is I had to look that up. That was not in my. So this is what did we say that meant?
Endpoint detection and response.
Okay. The idea is that if you've got the money to put something on each laptop that basically looks at and stops massive file modifications, it would detect and stop those. And then same thing with the honeypot. I like the idea with the creating an entire separate file server that has all the same file names, but just with junk data. Watch for anybody doing anything there and then report on it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is when he was talking about honeypots, I didn't know this, is he was like, "Oh yeah, and then to make it more realistic, there are a couple things you can do. You can map those device shares to actual endpoint devices so they show up there because if I'm a ransomware program and I'm just looking at all the devices attached, I don't know if it's real or not. And the question came up, hey,
Right.
how do you hide it from your end users? Because you don't want your end users clicking on it as well. And there
Right.
are registry commands in Windows, so you can actually hide them so your users don't actually see those drives. And
Interesting.
instead, he suggested you actually bookmark valid shared drive letters with these honeypot shared drives because ransomware programs are either going to start from A and work alphabetically or start from Z and come backwards to see what drives are available. And then they'll just start looking that way.
So put a honeypot at A and put a honeypot at Z.
Yep.
I like it. The
There are some really interesting things that he talked about.
and we can only cover a little bit here. I just would highly recommend anybody that's interested in this, which should be everybody, go read this thread.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
really well written thread.
It's like how to trick ransomware and
And
how to protect yourself.
and
And then shall we
then we
jump
get
on
to
to the
the
third? Yeah, your
Yeah,
favorite,
jump on to
Curtis.
the third one.
Sorry, what is the third one about, by the way?
Oh, the third
Yeah.
one, basically, it's you've been infected. What are we gonna do? Worst case scenario, you've been infected and it spread, and now you need to reach for your backups. So they mention go to the incident response plan, and of course, that assumes that you have one, which we've said that you need to have one, right?
Yep.
We've mentioned repeatedly that a ransomware attack is not the same as a disaster. There are elements that I'd say a disaster is a subset of a
Mhm.
typical DR response is a subset of a ransomware attack response.
I think people get confused because in the end, you're trying to do the same things, get your data up. But I think the steps and the number of people and the different types of people involved are significantly different between just a normal DR versus a ransomware recovery.
Simplistically, to me, the biggest difference between a responding to a ransomware attack and a disaster, it'd be the equivalent of if you're doing a DR and you've had a flood. Step number one is drain the data center, right? Get
Yeah.
all the water out of the data center. A ransomware attack is you're trying to drain the data center while you have a person standing there with a fire hose that's filling up your data center, right?
Yep.
That's the difference between a disaster recovery and a ransomware recovery is that they are actively still attacking you and you're actively experiencing the disaster at the same time as you're trying to recover from it. And so they've got a good thing here on what should be in an incident response, right? Some things you have to have in your incident response plan. Got 8 things about, right, procedures and policies and an incident response firm. You basically get professionals, retain them now, right? Oh, by the way, I just got to throw out a really hilarious thing from my granddaughter Lily yesterday. So we have a friend, a mutual friend that was in a car accident a while back, not seriously injured, but injured enough that there is a lawsuit that's going on. And Lily said she mentioned that I couldn't she couldn't pick her up because she was with her lawyer. And then she looks at me and we were just walking and then she's, "Do I have a lawyer?" I was like, "No, I don't think
Yeah.
you have a lawyer. You don't need
But
a lawyer
sometimes
right now."
but you're right. Most people don't even think about that. Like, even in like everyday, like normal situations, it's if I, God forbid, get arrested, who am I going to call? It's
Yeah, and so what they're saying here is go find who you're gonna hire and get
who
them
are you
on
going to call?
retainer now. Who
Ghostbusters.
you gonna call? And they got a policy. Oh, a policy. This is interesting. A policy for informing partners and customers and the media, right?
Yeah.
Identifying decision makers, right? All of that stuff. This should
Yeah.
all be decided up front. You should be deciding that now. I don't know how many times we can say that.
Yeah. And then they talk about restoring your data.
Restoring your data.
We all know
I,
about that,
I like
right?
how they said, all right, 3 posts in and we can finally talk about backups.
Yeah.
It's interesting here. And he talks about the typical call out is that ransomware is going to target your backups.
Yep.
And so you need some sort of immutable backup solution.
He does also talk, and I know, Curtis, you're probably going to have concerns with this, right? That you don't have to be offsite to protect your backups properly. He mentions that you could use strict network segmentation or other mechanisms to ensure separation, which would protect you in the case of ransomware, but may not protect you from all disasters that
Right.
could occur.
Agreed. And I don't have an issue with that. Obviously, I'll say obviously I work at a service-based backup company and we see that as this is easy peasy. All our backups are offsite. I'm not against, as a backup expert, I'm not against on-site backups. There's a lot of good reasons for an on-site copy, but I completely agree with this person that you have to protect that on-site copy from attacks. And there are a lot of very common backup designs, incredibly common backup designs that do not, that the
Provide
default
that.
installation of those
Yeah.
products do not protect you. Right.
Yep.
And I don't want to, I don't want to pick on our friends at Veeam, but that's a perfect example. The guys from Veeam came on here and they explained to you, if you listen, if you haven't seen those episodes, go back and listen to them about, when they talked about the Conti ransomware attacks and how that you can configure your Veeam backups to protect against that. My concern is that most of their customers are not listening to this podcast. By the way,
Yeah.
they're more than welcome, right? All 700,000 Veeam customers are more than welcome to come listen to the podcast. But if you just do the default installation and you don't take their recommendations on how to further protect your data, it's no different than any of the other products, right?
Yeah.
So
Read the
you've
manual.
got to stop doing that. Read the manual, read the best practices, call Rickatron. Rickatron will sort you out. And so he talks about that. He also talks about testing your backups.
Yep.
I'm editing right now, like literally I'm in the middle of editing the podcast, the episode of the Restore Test gone horribly wrong.
Schrodinger's backup.
That's a great, it's going to be a great episode. Schrodinger's
Yep.
backup. Exactly. That's going to, if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. It's a great episode.
And the author of the article also
And
refers to it, right? Yep.
Yes, he does. Did he actually refer to Schrodinger's
Yeah.
backup?
Yeah, hinging your company's future on a Schrodinger's backup thought experiment is a terrible idea. Don't do that.
Nice. I like it. And then why don't you talk about the decryption part?
Yeah. So I guess the final part, right, is you've been hit with encryption, right? So now what do you do? And in most cases, it's you can try to get, if you're lucky, there might be a free decryptor out there for your data. It's just going to take a very long time. And if you do pay the ransom, and you have to understand that paying the ransom may be illegal to some of these groups, right? They'll give you back a decryption key. Hopefully it'll work. It's in the ransomware group's best interest not to cheat you there, but you're taking a risk there as well. And then finally, once you've actually decrypted your data, you've gone back up and running, there's nothing that prevents them from either coming back and attacking you again if you haven't fixed anything, right? Or the next group coming back, because that's another common thing is one group gets in, encrypts your data, another group figures out a different mechanism because they know now that you're willing to pay. And so they might come after
Right.
you as well.
Right. And
so even
and
once you have
then-
your data decrypted, it's not the end of the story.
And then there's a what's next in all of these words. And this is a really long series of posts, which I highly recommend you go look through. There's one part where they typed in all caps, and this is it, right? When you're done, whatever you did, restore, pay the ransom, whatever it is, right? It's not over. You clearly have a serious gap in your defenses. You need to find these and fix them. And then this is all caps. And you need to understand that those gaps are bigger than just whatever the initial breach vector was. As highlighted in parts 1 and 2 of this series, there are several opportunities to stop a ransomware breach before it gets to this point.
Yep.
There was another one that I read. They said, if I was at a company that had a highly, I think it was actually in here, if I was at a company that had a highly publicized breach, does this hurt my chances of getting a job? And the author of this article didn't think so, because they basically said, you now have experience.
Yep. And I think it was actually at the end of this article is where he wrote about that. Yeah. It's something you should actually show that you've gone through this, because for a lot of people, it's just theoretical. They've never experienced it. It's like you, Curtis. I can sit here and talk about like how to back up your data, how to restore your data, ideally how it should be done. But I've never cut my teeth in a production environment trying to do a restore with people yelling at me over my shoulder or watching over my shoulder. Right. You have. And I think that's the difference, right? Is you have that experience because trial by fire.
Yeah. You just reminded me, and I know I've told this story before, but not everybody's listened to every episode. One of my favorite restore stories was back at my first big job, and we had somebody in the NOC that was coordinating the various things that were happening of this big restore. And we had another guy that was in the data center that was actually doing things. And he was talking to the person who was on the phone in the NOC, and he didn't know that he was on speaker. And so he said, so, where are you? Oh, I'm in the NOC. He goes, oh, so I suppose you have Tom and Tom standing on your left and right shoulder. And he was referring to our boss's boss and our boss's boss. And that would be Tom Thimides and Tom Lackey. And they were indeed standing both on his left and right shoulder. And they said that when he said that, oh, so you have Tom and Tom standing on your left and right shoulder. He said they just both took one step back.
But it's true, right? It's a stressful thing. Everyone's watching to make sure it goes perfect.
And we wish you all the best of luck. I continue to be concerned about our friends over there in the Ukraine, and we wish them the best of luck. And you should also be concerned about the potential ramifications that all of that has on continued further attacks on your data center. And read this article, read every word of this article, not just this summary.
Yeah.
And
Read
read all 3 parts. And we'll put links to it in the show description so that you can easily find it, because finding stuff on Reddit is not necessarily easy. Thanks again, Prasanna, for your wise shipping advice and good commentary on this article as well.
Anytime, Curtis. And I know normally when we talk about ransomware, you get very depressed. So it feels like this isn't a depressing article. It feels like here are things you should be doing. So it feels like
There are
a
things
positive.
that you should do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks to the listeners. We'd be nothing without you. Remember to subscribe